You notice it almost immediately. A slight tightening in their voice, a pause half a second longer than usual, a word that lands flatter than the rest. Most people would let it pass. You don't. Your attention narrows. Without effort, something in you registers the shift as relevant before you consciously label it. And once you've detected it, you can't return to the conversation as it was. The exchange splits in two, what is being said and what might be forming underneath it. You compare the tone to the previous sentence, to the last interaction, to the pattern you've quietly mapped over time. The room feels subtly less stable. Not hostile, not dramatic, just altered. And that alteration feels important. Your body responds before your thoughts do. A mild alertness, a readiness, as if you've just seen a small crack in glass and instinctively stepped back, even though it hasn't shattered. You don't call it anxiety. You call it awareness. You tell yourself you're simply good at reading people, sensitive to nuance, attuned to what others overlook, and on the surface, that may be true. You can detect emotional shifts with precision. You notice when enthusiasm fades mid-sentence, when sarcasm replaces warmth, when neutrality becomes guarded. But what makes your attention different is not just that you notice, it's that you immediately assess. Every tonal change becomes a potential signal, a possible precursor. You don't wait to see if it develops. You begin calculating what it could mean. Did you say something wrong? Did you miss a cue? Is something about to escalate? The conversation becomes less about exchange and more about evaluation. You are no longer just participating, you are monitoring. And monitoring requires energy. It assumes instability. It assumes that tone is not random, but predictive. That something is always about to shift further. Neutral conversations rarely feel neutral to you. Even calm exchanges contain data points. A slight decrease in responsiveness, a shorter answer than expected, a word choice that feels distant rather than close. These are small things, objectively insignificant. Yet your mind treats them as early indicators. Not because they always lead somewhere, but because they might. And that possibility is enough. You track consistency, you measure rhythm. When the rhythm changes, you feel it physically. The stability you perceived a moment ago weakens. You begin adjusting in subtle ways. You soften your tone, clarify your intention, offer reassurance that was not requested, all before the other person has explicitly expressed anything. You respond to what could be forming, not just what exists. And the conversation shifts again, shaped partly by your anticipation. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Tone changes. You react. Your reaction alters the dynamic. The dynamic confirms that tone matters. The system stays active. This vigilance doesn't switch off easily. Even in relaxed settings, you listen beneath the words. You analyze inflection. You notice how quickly someone responds, how their volume shifts, how their pacing changes. Silence becomes information. A delayed reply feels heavier than it objectively is. You rarely take tone at face value. Instead, you search for intention behind it. Was that impatience? Was that disappointment? Was that subtle withdrawal? The conversation becomes layered with invisible variables. And while others move through dialogue fluidly, you are running parallel interpretations in the background. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet and automatic. You rarely question why you do it. It feels practical, protective, efficient, because in your internal model, tone is not just expression. It is forecast. And forecasts are meant to be read early, before the weather turns. There is a specific moment that triggers the shift. It's subtle, a microsecond, when the other person's tone diverges from your expectation. Your body reacts before logic intervenes. Muscles tighten slightly, attention sharpens. The conversation stops being casual and becomes conditional. You begin testing the ground. You may ask a clarifying question. You may mirror their tone to reduce friction. You may attempt to stabilize the atmosphere. Not because conflict is present, but because it could be. The possibility alone activates your system. And once activated, it does not disengage until the interaction ends. You leave conversations mentally, replaying the tonal variations. reassessing whether your interpretations were accurate, whether you corrected in time, whether you prevented something that might have unfolded. Even if nothing explicit happened, the effort remains. You feel as though you managed something invisible, something that others might not have even noticed. What makes this pattern persistent is that it often appears functional. You rarely get blindsided. You sense tension before it becomes overt. You adjust early. You smooth over potential friction. From the outside, this looks like emotional intelligence. You are responsive. You are perceptive. You adapt fluidly. But internally, the experience is not neutral. It carries an undertone of anticipation, a readiness for destabilization. Conversations are rarely just conversations. They are fields that can shift. And you are positioned at the edge of each shift, scanning for tremors. When tone remains steady, you feel temporary relief. When it changes, you mobilize. The baseline assumption is not stability. It is volatility managed through vigilance. And vigilance, repeated over years, becomes indistinguishable from personality. You begin to believe this is simply who you are. You may even take pride in it. The ability to detect emotional nuance before others do. The skill of adjusting quickly. The accuracy of your interpretations. And sometimes, you are right. Sometimes the tone shift did indicate irritation, or withdrawal or concealed frustration. These confirmations strengthen the system. They teach you that your scanning is justified, that missing a shift would be costly. Each accurate prediction reinforces the belief that tone is a warning signal, that subtle changes precede visible reactions. What you rarely examine is how often the shift meant nothing. How many tonal variations were simply fatigue, distraction, or neutral fluctuation? Your system does not require proof of threat. It requires possibility. And possibility is always present. So the scanning continues, not because danger is constant, but because unpredictability once was. At some point, this sensing became automatic. You don't consciously decide to monitor tone. It happens. Your nervous system engages before conscious thought. You learned, at some stage, that small changes mattered, that emotional shifts were not random, that tone could precede consequence. The environment may not have been openly chaotic. It may have appeared normal on the surface. But beneath that surface, stability was conditional. A slight irritation could escalate. A small disappointment could become withdrawal. A minor misstep could trigger disproportionate reaction. You adapted by detecting changes early. Early detection allowed early adjustment. Adjustment reduced fallout. Over time, this became efficient, reliable, necessary. Your system learned that prevention begins with perception, and perception must be constant. This is why neutrality can feel uneasy. When someone's tone is flat, you don't automatically interpret it as neutral. You interpret it as ambiguous. And ambiguity demands analysis. Is it distance? Is it fatigue? Is it contained frustration? The lack of clarity feels unstable. You search for microsignals to confirm safety, a softening in their voice, a slight warmth returning, a word choice that indicates alignment. Until you detect something reassuring, you remain slightly guarded. You may not show it outwardly, but internally, the assessment continues. The conversation feels like something that could tilt. You are not relaxed inside it. You are positioned inside it, observing, measuring, adjusting. And because this has been your baseline for so long, you may not realize how much cognitive energy it consumes. The core of this pattern is not curiosity, it is anticipation. You are not just listening for meaning. You are listening for deviation, for the first sign that the emotional ground is shifting. And when it shifts, even slightly, your system assumes direction, toward tension, toward criticism, toward withdrawal. Not because it always happens, but because at some earlier point, it did, repeatedly enough to train you. The brain is efficient. It encodes patterns that once ensured safety. If tone preceded conflict, tone becomes predictive. If subtle withdrawal preceded rejection, subtle withdrawal becomes threat. The adaptation remains long after the original environment has changed. Now, even in stable relationships, your system scans as if instability is imminent. You are not reacting to the present moment alone. You are reacting to a history encoded in microsignals. By the time you consciously interpret the shift, your body has already prepared. You may feel a slight drop in your stomach, a tightening in your chest, a need to correct something before it is named. You adjust your phrasing, clarify your intention, soften your delivery. You may even apologize preemptively. Not because the other person accused you, but because you sensed the possibility that they could. This preemptive calibration feels rational. It feels responsible. But it reveals something deeper. Your system does not assume neutrality will remain neutral. It assumes it can turn, and your role is to prevent that turn before it becomes explicit. This is where the distinction becomes clear. You are not simply attentive to tone. You are scanning it. The difference is subtle but significant. Attention observes. Scanning anticipates threat. Attention remains open. Scanning is directional. It looks for signs that something is about to move against you. When someone's voice shifts, your first internal question is not neutral curiosity. It is risk assessment. Is this the beginning of criticism? Is this the start of withdrawal? Is this irritation forming? The conversation becomes less about connection and more about prediction. You position yourself defensively before there is anything concrete to defend against. And because you move early, the external conflict may never materialize, which makes the scanning feel necessary. Even though what it is guarding against may no longer be present in your current environment. The revelation is not that you are perceptive. It is that your perception is calibrated towards self-protection. You learn to detect tonal shifts because, at Chisomi point, shifts carried consequence. The environment taught you that stability could change without warning, that emotional weather turned quickly. So you trained yourself to read the sky. Now, even on clear days, you check for clouds. Even in steady conversations, you monitor for pressure changes. You are not just noticing shifts. You are searching for early signs that something is about to turn against you. The vigilance feels like personality, but it began as adaptation. And this pattern rarely exists alone. The same system that scans tone often scans facial expression, pacing, silence. It extends beyond conversations into environments, into relationships, into decisions. Once you learn to monitor for subtle shifts, the monitoring spreads. There is another behavior connected to this one. Another quiet adaptation that hides beneath what appears to be simple awareness. And it follows the same logic of anticipation, long before anything has actually happened.